The thing about Christmas proposals is that everyone expects them to be magical. Hallmark has convinced the world that getting down on one knee while snow falls gently outside leads to tearful yes moments and happily ever after. What they don't show you is the alternative ending where your girlfriend spits in your face in front of your entire family. I'm Jamie Riley, 33 years old, and I fix computers for a living. Not glamorous, but it pays well enough to afford the 2-carat diamond ring currently burning a hole in my jacket pocket. The ring I'd been planning to present to Vanessa, my girlfriend of 2 years, in approximately 10 minutes. My parents' house in Newton buzzed with the usual Christmas Eve chaos. Mom had outdone herself with decorations this year. Twinkling lights draped every surface, garland wound around the banister, and a massive tree dominated the living room corner. The smell of ham and cinnamon filled the air, mixing with the sound of my sister Katie arguing with Dad about politics, while my Uncle Frank told the same war story he'd been recycling since 1987. Vanessa sat beside me on the couch, looking stunning as always in her red dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite the 2-hour drive from our Boston apartment. She worked in marketing for a high-end real estate firm, and everything about her screamed success and ambition. "Your family is so quaint," she whispered to me, her tone suggesting quaint wasn't necessarily a compliment. I should have recognized the warning signs then. The way she checked her phone every few minutes, how she'd barely touched Mom's famous Christmas cookies. The subtle eye rolls when Katie mentioned her teaching job at the local elementary school. But I was committed to my plan. I'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, coordinating with Mom to have everyone gathered in the living room after dinner. The ring was perfect. I'd spent 3 months researching cuts and clarity, visiting 5 different jewelry stores until I found exactly what I thought Vanessa would want. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room gradually quieted. Mom clasped her hands together, her eyes already glistening with anticipated tears. Dad lowered his newspaper. Katie paused mid-sentence in her conversation with our cousin Mike. Even Uncle Frank stopped talking, which was nothing short of miraculous. I turned to Vanessa, who was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Confusion? Annoyance? In hindsight, it was probably horror. "Vanessa," I began, dropping to one knee and pulling out the ring box. "These past 2 years have been incredible. You've made me a better man, and I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" The silence that followed wasn't the good kind. It wasn't the breathless moment before a joyful yes. It was the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, the kind that precedes disaster. Vanessa stared at the ring, then at me, then at my family's expectant faces. Her lip curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Are you serious right now?" she said, her voice carrying across the room like a slap. I blinked, still on one knee, still holding the ring box like an idiot. Yes? This tiny little thing?" She gestured at the ring with obvious disgust. "This is what you think I'm worth? 2 carats of mediocrity in a setting my grandmother would call outdated?" The room had gone from silent to tomb quiet. I could hear the Christmas tree lights humming in their sockets. "Vanessa, Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." She cut me off by doing something I never could have anticipated in my worst nightmares. She leaned forward and spat directly in my face. The saliva hit my cheek and started sliding toward my jaw. I stayed frozen on one knee, too shocked to move, too humiliated to process what had just happened. "Small and pathetic," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Just like you." That's when something inside me shifted. Not rage. That would come later. This was colder, more calculated. I reached up with my free hand and calmly wiped her spit off my face with my napkin. Then I stood up, closed the ring box with a quiet snap, and looked her directly in the eyes. "Get out," I said. "Jamie," Mom started. "Get out of my parents' house," I continued, my voice steady as granite. "Get out now and don't come back." Vanessa's eyes flashed with something that might have been surprise. She'd expected me to crumble, to beg, to make a scene. Instead, I was giving her exactly what she'd asked for, an exit. "Fine," she said, grabbing her purse and standing. "Your family needed to know what kind of loser they've been coddling anyway." She stormed toward the front door, her heels clicking against Mom's hardwood floors. The door slammed behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. I looked around at my family's shocked faces. Mom had tears in her eyes, but not the happy kind she'd been expecting. Dad looked like he wanted to chase Vanessa down and give her a piece of his mind. Katie was staring at me with a mixture of sympathy and admiration. "Well," I said, sliding the ring box back into my pocket. "At least the eggnog's still spiked." Uncle Frank snorted with laughter, breaking the tension. Within minutes, the family had rallied around me with hugs, reassurances, and promises that I was better off without her. But I wasn't really listening to their comfort. I was thinking about revenge. The drive back to our Boston apartment, my apartment now, I supposed, gave me 90 minutes to think. Vanessa had taken her own car to my parents' house, claiming she might need to leave early for a work emergency. Now I understood the real reason. By the time I pulled into our building's parking garage, I'd made several decisions. First, I wasn't going to wallow in self-pity. Second, I wasn't going to let Vanessa control the narrative of what had happened. And third, I was going to make her regret humiliating me in front of my family. I'd always been good with computers and technology. It was my job, after all. What Vanessa didn't realize was that being an IT consultant had taught me a lot more than just how to fix broken servers. I knew how digital footprints worked, how social media algorithms functioned, and most importantly, how to find information people thought they'd hidden. The apartment felt different when I walked in. Vanessa's presence lingered in the perfectly arranged throw pillows, the expensive candles she insisted we needed, the stack of fashion magazines on the coffee table, but it also felt lighter somehow, like a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying had been lifted. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat down at my computer. Time to do some research. Vanessa's social media presence was extensive and carefully curated. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, she maintained profiles on all of them, each one designed to project an image of success and sophistication. Her Instagram was particularly revealing, full of photos of expensive meals, designer handbags, and exotic vacations that I now realized I'd been funding. But it was her private messages that interested me most. I'd set up the Wi-Fi in our apartment, which meant I had access to all the network traffic. It's amazing what people will send over unencrypted connections when they think nobody's watching. Vanessa had been careless with her digital security, and that carelessness was about to cost her. The messages painted a picture I'd been too blind to see. Conversations with her friends Elena and Paige, where she mocked my job, my family, my proposal plans. Screenshots she'd sent them of the ring I'd bought, with laughing emojis and comments about how pathetic it was. Worst of all, detailed discussions about her exit strategy, how she was planning to break up with me after the holidays and move in with some guy named Tommy Russo. Tommy Russo. The name was familiar, and it took me a few minutes to place it. He owned a luxury car dealership in Back Bay, the kind of place that sold Ferraris and Lamborghinis to people with more money than sense. Vanessa had mentioned meeting him at some work function, but she'd described him as just a client. Apparently, he was much more than that. The messages between Vanessa and Tommy were explicit in their planning, if not their content. They'd been seeing each other for months, meeting at expensive hotels and restaurants while I worked late to pay for Vanessa's lifestyle. Tommy was married, which added another layer of deception to their relationship. But the most damaging discovery was buried in Vanessa's work emails. She'd been planning to steal one of my biggest clients, a property development company that did millions in annual business. She'd convinced my childhood friend Ryan Harper, who owned a gym where several of the company's executives worked out, to introduce her to them. Ryan had no idea he was being used as a pawn in Vanessa's scheme. I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of bourbon. Vanessa had underestimated me in every possible way. She saw a boring IT guy who was useful for paying bills and providing stability while she pursued her real interests. She had no idea that boring IT guys knew how to gather information, how to connect dots, and how to use technology as a weapon. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Dude, what happened? Vanessa just posted something crazy on Instagram." I opened Instagram to find that Vanessa had already begun her counterattack. The post was a video she'd apparently filmed in her car after leaving my parents' house. In it, she was crying, actual tears, which was impressive considering how quickly she'd managed to produce them, and talking about how she'd just escaped an abusive situation. "I can't believe I stayed as long as I did," she sobbed to the camera. "Jamie's family is so controlling, and he's been manipulating me for months. When I tried to leave tonight, he became aggressive and frightening. I'm just grateful I got out safely." The comments were already pouring in from her friends and followers, offering support and expressing outrage at my supposed behavior. Elena and Paige had shared the video with crying emojis and hashtags about supporting survivors. I had to admire the strategy, even as it infuriated me. By claiming to be the victim, Vanessa was getting ahead of any narrative I might try to create. She was positioning herself as the wronged party while painting me as an abuser. But Vanessa had made a crucial mistake. She'd declared war on someone who had access to all her secrets. I spent the next 2 hours implementing my first counterstrike. I started by freezing our joint bank accounts where I'd been the primary contributor for 2 years. Then, I canceled the credit cards I'd been paying for, the ones Vanessa used for her shopping sprees and expensive lunches. Next, I gathered screenshots of all her private messages, particularly the ones where she mocked my family and bragged about her deception. I also compiled evidence of her affair with Tommy Russo and her plan to steal my client. But I didn't release any of it yet. The key to effective revenge is timing and precision. Release information too early, and your target has time to prepare a defense. Release it too late, and people have moved on to other drama. Instead, I made a single phone call to my boss, Mr. Hamilton. Hamilton was old school, the kind of man who believed in handshake deals and personal integrity. He'd been running his IT consulting firm for 25 years, and he had zero tolerance for people who tried to steal clients or betray trust. "Jamie? It's late for a work call." "I know, sir, and I apologize. But I've discovered something you need to know about. It involves corporate espionage and client theft." Hamilton's tone sharpened immediately. "I'm listening." I explained the situation carefully, focusing on the business aspects rather than the personal drama. I sent him screenshots of Vanessa's emails and her communications with Ryan about targeting our client. "This is serious, Jamie. If she succeeds in stealing this client, we're looking at significant financial damage." "Yes, sir. I thought you should know immediately so we can take appropriate action." "Good work. Forward me everything you have, and we'll discuss next steps tomorrow." After hanging up, I allowed myself a small smile. Vanessa thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She had no idea that I'd just put her in check. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from my sister Katie. "Mom's worried about you. Are you okay?" I typed back, "I'm fine, better than fine, actually. Vanessa did me a favor tonight." "What do you mean?" "She showed me who she really is. Now I know exactly how to handle the situation." There was a long pause before Katie replied, "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous," I wrote back. "Just thorough." I finished my bourbon and headed to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. My mind was already working on the next phase of my plan. Vanessa had humiliated me publicly, tried to steal my client, and betrayed my trust in every way possible. She was about to learn that boring IT guys could be very creative when properly motivated. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Vanessa's social media campaign had gained momentum overnight, with her Instagram video being shared across multiple platforms. The comments section had turned into a support group for her supposed trauma, with dozens of people expressing outrage at my alleged behavior. But I also had a message from Mr. Hamilton asking me to come in early for an emergency meeting. Perfect timing. Hamilton's office overlooked Boston Harbor, and on a clear December morning like this one, you could see all the way to the airport. He was standing at the window when I arrived, holding a cup of coffee and wearing the expression he usually reserved for clients who tried to negotiate his rates. "Jamie, sit down. I've been reviewing the materials you sent me, and this situation is more serious than I initially thought." He turned to face me, and I could see the anger in his eyes. Hamilton took client relationships personally, and the idea that someone would try to manipulate his business partnerships was deeply offensive to him. This woman, Vanessa, she's been systematically gathering information about our client for months. The emails you forwarded show clear intent to steal proprietary information and undermine our contract. Yes, sir. I discovered it last night while trying to understand why she'd been asking so many questions about my work. And this Ryan Harper? He's the connection she's been using? He's an old friend who owns a gym. Several executives from the client company work out there. Ryan had no idea what Vanessa was really doing. She told him she was just interested in meeting new people for networking purposes. Hamilton nodded grimly. "We need to get ahead of this before she can do any real damage. I'm going to call the client directly and inform them of the situation. I'm also going to suggest that they might want to reconsider any meetings or proposals they might receive from Vanessa's company." This was better than I'd hoped. Not only was Hamilton taking the threat seriously, but he was also prepared to actively undermine Vanessa's scheme. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "I recorded a conversation with Ryan last night where he unknowingly confirmed details of Vanessa's plan." I played the audio file I'd captured during our phone call. Ryan's voice came through clearly as he described how Vanessa had been asking him to arrange introductions and had been pumping him for information about the executives' schedules and preferences. "She said she wanted to propose some kind of partnership," Ryan's voice explained. "Something about luxury property marketing. She seemed to know a lot about their current projects." Hamilton's expression grew darker. "This is corporate espionage, Jamie. We're not just talking about a personal betrayal here. This is a potential lawsuit. What do you want me to do?" "For now, nothing. Let me handle the client relationship and the legal aspects. But I want you to document everything you have. If this goes to court, we'll need a complete record of her activities." I left Hamilton's office feeling satisfied with the morning's work. Vanessa's professional reputation was about to take a serious hit, and she didn't even know it yet. But I wasn't done. The professional sabotage was just one front in this war. I drove to Ryan's gym, a converted warehouse in Somerville that catered to serious athletes and fitness enthusiasts. Ryan had built the business from nothing over the past 5 years, and it had become a gathering place for Boston's young professional crowd. I found him in his office, looking hungover and confused. "Jamie, man, what's going on? Vanessa's been blowing up social media saying you attacked her or something." "Ryan, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Vanessa has been using you." I explained the situation methodically, showing him screenshots of Vanessa's messages where she described him as easy to manipulate and useful for accessing the right people. I watched his expression change from confusion to anger as he realized how thoroughly he'd been played. "She said she was interested in fitness marketing," he said slowly. "She kept asking about my clients, their businesses, their schedules. I thought she was just being friendly. She was gathering intelligence. Everything you told her, she was planning to use to steal one of my biggest clients." Ryan stood up and started pacing around his small office. That manipulative witch. I introduced her to 3 different executives because she said she wanted to discuss partnership opportunities. Did any of them seem interested? Actually, yeah. Mike DeLuca from the development company seemed really impressed with her presentation. They were supposed to meet again after the holidays. Mike DeLuca was exactly the client Hamilton was worried about losing. Vanessa had gotten further with her scheme than I'd realized. Ryan, I need you to do something for me. Call DeLuca and tell him you've discovered some concerning information about Vanessa's company. Don't be specific. Just say you think he should be careful about any business relationships with her. Are you sure about this, Jamie? I mean, I'm angry about being used, but interfering with someone's business. She spat in my face in front of my entire family, then went online claiming I was abusive. She's been planning to steal my client for months while I paid her bills. And she's been having an affair with a married man the entire time we were together. Ryan's eyes widened. An affair? Are you serious? I showed him some of the messages between Vanessa and Tommy Russo. Ryan read them with growing disgust. Okay, I'm convinced. What else do you need me to do? Just make that call to DeLuca, and maybe share some of this information with your other clients, the ones who know Vanessa. People should understand who they're really dealing with. Ryan agreed, and I left the gym feeling like the second phase of my plan was falling into place. Vanessa's professional network was about to discover some uncomfortable truths about her character. But the social media war was still raging, and I needed to address that front as well. I spent the afternoon crafting my response carefully. Instead of directly contradicting Vanessa's story, I decided to let her own words condemn her. I created a simple website using my web development skills and uploaded screenshots of her private messages, the ones where she mocked my family, bragged about her deception, and planned her exit strategy. I didn't include anything about her affair with Tommy Russo yet. That information was too valuable to waste on the opening salvo. The website was clean and professional, with timestamps and metadata proving the authenticity of the screenshots. I titled it simply, The Truth About Christmas Eve, and included a brief statement explaining that I was sharing this information to correct false accusations that had been made against me and my family. Then I shared the link in a private message to Elena and Paige, Vanessa's 2 closest friends and biggest supporters on social media. The response was immediate and devastating. Elena called Vanessa within minutes of viewing the website, and their conversation quickly escalated into a screaming match that ended with Elena posting her own Instagram story about fake friends and their lies. Paige's reaction was even more dramatic. She shared the website link publicly with a caption about how shocked and disgusted she was to learn the truth about someone she'd trusted. Within hours, the narrative had completely flipped. The same people who had been offering Vanessa support and sympathy were now expressing outrage at her deception. Comments on her original video shifted from supportive to accusatory, with former friends demanding explanations and apologies. Vanessa tried to control the damage by claiming the screenshots were fake, but the technical metadata proved otherwise. She then attempted to delete her original video, but dozens of people had already saved copies. By evening, she was calling me repeatedly, but I didn't answer. I was busy implementing the next phase of my plan. I'd discovered that Tommy Russo's wife Jessica was very active on social media, particularly in local charity and social circles. She frequently posted about family values and the importance of trust in relationships. I created an anonymous email account and sent Jessica a simple message with photographic evidence of her husband's affair. I didn't include any editorial commentary. The photos spoke for themselves. Jessica's response was swift and public. Within an hour of receiving my email, she'd posted a Facebook status announcing her separation from Tommy and thanking her friends for their support during this difficult time of betrayal and deception. The post was shared hundreds of times within the first few hours, and several local news outlets picked up the story because of Tommy's prominence in the luxury car business. Vanessa's affair was now public knowledge, adding another layer of scandal to her already damaged reputation. I poured myself another bourbon and surveyed the day's work. Vanessa's professional prospects were in ruins, her social circle had turned against her, and her affair had been exposed. But I wasn't finished yet. The real confrontation was still to come. The next morning brought a winter storm that blanketed Boston in 6 inches of fresh snow. I was watching the flakes fall from my apartment window when I saw Vanessa's car pull into the parking garage. She'd been staying at a hotel since Christmas Eve, but apparently she'd decided it was time to collect her belongings. I wasn't surprised. The past 48 hours had been devastating for her. Her job was in jeopardy after Hamilton's call to her boss, her social circle had collapsed, and Tommy Russo had cut off all contact after his wife's public announcement of their separation. What did surprise me was that she wasn't alone. Tommy Russo emerged from the passenger seat of Vanessa's BMW, looking around nervously, as if he expected photographers to jump out from behind parked cars. He was shorter than I'd expected, with the kind of artificially perfect appearance that screamed insecurity and too much money spent on personal grooming. I grabbed my phone and started recording as I watched them from my third-floor window. This was an unexpected gift, evidence that their relationship was continuing even after the public exposure. They were arguing about something as they walked toward the building entrance. Vanessa was gesticulating wildly while Tommy kept looking over his shoulder. Their body language suggested panic and desperation rather than romance. I decided it was time for a direct confrontation. I took the elevator down to the parking garage and positioned myself near Vanessa's car. The building's security cameras would capture everything that happened, which suited my purposes perfectly. They emerged from the elevator 20 minutes later, Vanessa carrying 2 suitcases and Tommy hauling a box of her belongings. They were still arguing, their voices echoing off the concrete walls. "Told you this was a mistake," Tommy was saying. "My wife has already filed for divorce, and now my business partners are asking questions." "It's temporary," Vanessa replied. "Once this blows over, we can—" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me leaning against her car. "Hello, Vanessa." "Tommy." Tommy looked like he wanted to disappear into the concrete floor. Vanessa's expression shifted from surprise to anger to something that might have been calculation. "Jamie, I was hoping we could talk." "Really? Because your social media posts suggested you never wanted to see me again. Something about me being abusive and dangerous. I was upset. I said things I didn't mean." "You mean like when you spat in my face, or when you called me pathetic in front of my entire family?" Tommy cleared his throat. "Look, man, maybe we should all just—" "You should be quiet," I said, turning to face him. "You're married, or were married, until yesterday. How's Jessica handling the divorce proceedings?" Tommy's face went pale. "How do you know about your wife? About your affair? About your business partner's concerns?" I smiled. I'm very thorough when I need to be. I pulled out my phone and showed them both the photos I'd been taking from my window. Clear shots of them together, arguing, looking guilty and desperate. These would make interesting additions to Jessica's divorce filing, don't you think? Proof that the affair is continuing even after public exposure. "What do you want?" Vanessa asked. "I want you to understand consequences. For 2 years, I supported you financially while you planned to betray me. You tried to steal my client, destroy my reputation, and humiliate my family. You thought I was too weak or too stupid to fight back." I walked over to Tommy's Porsche, a gleaming silver convertible that probably cost more than most people's houses. "Nice car, Tommy. I bet it's expensive to maintain." "Don't touch it," he said quickly. "Oh, I'm not going to damage it. That would be illegal." I pulled out a small device from my pocket, a tire pressure gauge I'd modified with a valve core removal tool. "I'm just going to let some air out of the tires. Completely legal, just inconvenient." I knelt down beside the front tire and began deflating it slowly. The hissing sound echoed through the parking garage. "Stop," Tommy said, but he made no move to physically intervene. You can call the police if you want, I said, moving to the second tire, but then you'll have to explain why you're here with another man's girlfriend, continuing an affair that's already destroyed your marriage. Vanessa was recording me with her phone, probably hoping to capture evidence of harassment or property damage. But I was being careful to stay within legal boundaries. Deflating someone's tires was annoying, but not criminal. This is harassment, she said. No, this is accountability. Harassment was when you posted lies about me online. Harassment was when you tried to steal my client. This is just me helping Tommy understand that actions have consequences. I finished with the tires and stood up, brushing snow off my knees. The Porsche was now sitting on 4 flat tires, looking significantly less impressive. Here's what's going to happen, I said to Tommy. You're going to donate $50,000 to the women's shelter downtown. You're going to end all contact with Vanessa, and you're going to stay away from my building and my business. You can't make me. I can't make you do anything, but I can send Jessica's lawyer detailed documentation of your continuing affair. I can share information about your business practices with your partners, and I can make sure that everyone in Boston's luxury car market knows exactly what kind of person they're dealing with. Tommy looked at Vanessa, then back at me. I could see him calculating the cost of defiance versus the cost of compliance. $50,000 is a lot of money, he said finally. It's less than your car cost, and significantly less than Jessica's going to take in the divorce settlement. I turned to Vanessa, who was still holding her phone but had stopped recording. As for you, you have 24 hours to collect the rest of your belongings. After that, anything you've left behind gets donated to charity. This is my apartment too, she protested. Actually, it's not. The lease is in my name, paid for with my money. You're a guest who's overstayed her welcome. I started walking toward the elevator, then paused and looked back at them. Tommy was staring at his deflated tires while Vanessa clutched her suitcases like a shield. Oh, and Vanessa? Next time you want to destroy someone's reputation, make sure you understand who you're dealing with first. The elevator doors closed on their shocked faces, and I rode back up to my apartment feeling satisfied with the morning's work. The physical confrontation had been more effective than I'd expected, not because of any violence or property damage, but because it had demonstrated that I was no longer the passive victim they'd expected me to remain. But this was still just the beginning. The real reckoning was yet to come. Over the next week, I watched Vanessa's world systematically collapse from the comfort of my apartment. The beauty of modern revenge is that you don't need to actively destroy someone. You just need to remove the artificial supports they've built their life on, and let gravity do the rest. The professional consequences came first. Hamilton's conversation with our client had been more effective than I'd hoped. Not only did they cancel their planned meeting with Vanessa's company, but they also shared their concerns with other businesses in their network. Word spread quickly through Boston's relatively small professional community that Vanessa Cole was someone to avoid. Her boss at the real estate firm called her in for a meeting on January 2nd. I know this because Ryan had become an enthusiastic ally in my campaign, and one of his gym members worked at Vanessa's company. According to the office gossip, Vanessa had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into her questionable business practices and professional ethics. The social consequences were even more dramatic. Elena and Paige had not only turned against Vanessa, but had begun actively working to damage her reputation. They shared screenshots of private conversations where Vanessa had mocked mutual friends, revealed secrets, and generally demonstrated the kind of casual cruelty that people overlook when it's not directed at them. The revelation about her affair with Tommy Russo had been particularly damaging. Boston's social scene was surprisingly small and interconnected, and Jessica Russo was well liked in the charity and cultural circles where Vanessa had been trying to establish herself. Jessica's friends rallied around her and turned against both Tommy and Vanessa with the righteous fury of people who'd discovered betrayal in their midst. Tommy, meanwhile, had made the donation to the women's shelter as I'd demanded, but it hadn't saved his marriage or his business relationships. His luxury car dealership was struggling as wealthy clients took their business elsewhere, unwilling to associate with someone who'd been publicly exposed as an adulterer. But the most satisfying consequence was watching Vanessa's carefully constructed social media presence crumble. Her Instagram followers were abandoning her in droves, and the comments on her posts had turned uniformly hostile. She'd tried to rehabilitate her image with posts about learning and growing and focusing on self-improvement, but the damage was too extensive to repair. I was monitoring all of this from my apartment when my building's concierge called to inform me that Vanessa was in the lobby, asking to be let up. "She says she needs to collect some belongings," he explained. "Should I send her up?" I looked around the apartment. I'd already boxed up most of her possessions and donated them to various charities, keeping detailed receipts for tax purposes. The few items that remained were things I thought she might actually want back: family photos, jewelry, personal documents. "Send her up," I said. She looked terrible when I opened the door. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled. Her makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her expensive clothes looked like she'd been sleeping in them. The confident, manipulative woman who'd spat in my face 2 weeks ago had been replaced by someone who looked desperate and defeated. "Jamie, we need to talk." "No, we don't. Your things are in boxes by the door. Take them and leave." "Please, just listen to me for 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her enter. She walked into the living room and looked around as if seeing the apartment for the first time. "You redecorated. I removed your things. The apartment looks like it did before you moved in." She sat down on the couch without being invited, a presumption that would have annoyed me a week ago, but now just seemed pathetic. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. What I did at Christmas was unforgivable. I was scared and confused, and I handled everything wrong." "Scared of what? A marriage proposal from someone who loved you? Scared of settling, scared of being ordinary? You have to understand, Jamie, I grew up poor, really poor. My whole life has been about climbing out of that situation, about becoming someone important. So you decided to use me as a stepping stone. It wasn't like that. Not at first. I did care about you. I do care about you. But when I met Tommy, when I saw the kind of life he could offer, the kind of life his wife was already living." Vanessa winced. That was wrong. I know that now. But I felt trapped between 2 different futures, and I made terrible choices. I sat down across from her, curious to see where this performance was leading. "What do you want, Vanessa?" "I want to fix this. I want to make things right between us. There is no us anymore. You made that clear when you spat in my face. I can change. I know I can be better than this. You can be better, just not with me." She started crying then, and I had to admit the tears looked genuine. But I'd seen her manufacture emotions before, and I wasn't moved by the display. "Please, Jamie, I've lost everything. My job, my friends, my apartment. Tommy won't return my calls. I have nowhere else to go. You could go home to your family." "You know I can't do that. They'd never understand." "Then you could get a job and rebuild your life like an adult." "Who's going to hire me now? Everyone in Boston knows what happened." I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. This was the moment I'd been working toward, the complete collapse of her artificial world, the removal of all the supports she'd used to avoid facing consequences for her actions. "You're right," I said finally. "No one in Boston is going to hire you. Your reputation here is finished." Hope flickered in her eyes, as if she thought I was about to offer her a solution. "But that's not my problem to solve," I continued. "You created this situation through your own choices. You can fix it through your own choices." "How?" "Move somewhere else. Start over. Learn to live within your means instead of constantly trying to climb social ladders. Get therapy to figure out why you think manipulating people is acceptable." "I can't just start over. I'm 30 years old." You're 30 years old and you have a college degree and work experience. You're not a victim here, Vanessa. You're someone who got caught being cruel and manipulative." She stood up abruptly, her sadness transforming back into the anger I was more familiar with. "You did this to me. You destroyed my life out of spite. I exposed your actions to the people they affected. I didn't destroy your life. I revealed what your life actually was underneath all the pretense. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching me suffer." I considered the question honestly. "I'm satisfied that you're finally experiencing consequences for your behavior. If that's the same as enjoying your suffering, then yes." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her cycling through different emotional strategies: anger, sadness, manipulation, desperation. Finally, she seemed to settle on resignation. "I really did love you, in my own way." "No, you didn't. You loved what I could provide for you. There's a difference." She walked to the door and picked up the boxes containing her remaining possessions. They were heavier than she'd expected, and she struggled with them for a moment before managing to get them balanced. "Goodbye, Jamie. Goodbye, Vanessa." The door closed behind her with a quiet click, and I was alone in my apartment for the first time in 2 years. The silence felt different now, not empty, but peaceful. I poured myself a bourbon and stood at the window, watching the snow fall over Boston Harbor. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was probably calling friends who wouldn't answer, texting contacts who'd blocked her number, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life she'd spent years constructing on lies and manipulation. I felt no guilt about her situation. She'd made her choices with full knowledge of their potential consequences. The only difference was that she'd finally encountered someone who was willing to hold her accountable. But as I stood there sipping my drink, I realized that my revenge was complete. Vanessa was facing the natural consequences of her actions, and I had played my role in ensuring those consequences couldn't be avoided or deflected. The rest was up to her. 3 weeks later, I thought the Vanessa chapter of my life was finally closed. She'd disappeared from Boston entirely, and according to Ryan's network of gossips, she'd moved back to whatever small town she'd originally escaped from. Her social media accounts had gone dark. Tommy Russo was focused on salvaging what remained of his business and marriage, and I'd settled into a comfortable routine of work, family dinners, and evenings spent reading instead of managing someone else's drama. Then she showed up at my door at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night in the middle of a thunderstorm. The knock was soft, almost hesitant, completely unlike the confident woman who used to live here. I checked the security camera and saw her standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain, holding a single suitcase and looking like she'd been traveling for hours. I almost didn't answer. Our last conversation had provided closure, and I had no interest in reopening old wounds. But curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself unlocking the door. "Hello, Jamie." She looked worse than she had 3 weeks ago. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes were wrinkled and cheap, and she'd lost enough weight that her face looked gaunt. The confident manipulator was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely broken. "What are you doing here, Vanessa?" "I came to apologize. Really apologize, not just try to get something from you." "You could have called." "You wouldn't have answered, and this needed to be said in person." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her enter. She set her suitcase down and looked around the apartment with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You've made it nice. It feels more like home now." "It is my home. What do you want?" She sat down on the edge of the couch, perched like she was ready to flee at any moment. "I want to tell you that you were right, about everything. I was using you. I was manipulating people. I was building my life on lies and other people's kindness. I didn't want to admit it, but these past few weeks have forced me to face some uncomfortable truths about myself." "Where have you been?" "Back home in Ohio, living with my mother in the same trailer park I swore I'd never return to." She laughed bitterly. Turns out that when you burn all your bridges, there's only one place left to go. What happened to Tommy? Tommy was never going to leave his wife for me. I think I knew that all along, but I convinced myself otherwise because it was easier than accepting that I was just his midlife crisis entertainment. I sat down across from her, maintaining distance but willing to listen. His wife took him back, by the way. Apparently, the public humiliation was enough punishment for her. His business is recovering, and they're in counseling. He sent me a check for $10,000 and a note saying he was sorry for the complications. Complications. That's one way to describe destroying multiple lives. I know. And I know that what I did to you was worse than what he did to me, because you actually cared about me, and I betrayed that trust deliberately. The thunder outside was getting louder, and rain was hitting the windows hard enough to rattle the glass. Vanessa flinched at each sound, as if the storm was echoing her internal turmoil. I've been in therapy, she continued. Real therapy, not just someone to validate my feelings. Dr. Martinez doesn't let me get away with anything. She makes me examine why I do the things I do, why I think I deserve things I haven't earned. And what have you learned? That I'm terrified of being ordinary, that I've spent so much energy trying to escape my background that I never developed any real sense of self-worth, that I treat people as objects to be used rather than individuals to be respected. She was crying now, but quietly, without the dramatic flair she'd once used to manipulate emotions. I also learned that you never deserved any of what I did to you. You were kind and generous and patient, and I repaid that by humiliating you and trying to steal from you. There's no excuse for that behavior. I watched her cry and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. Not the kind that leads to forgiveness or reconciliation, but the simple human sympathy you feel when you see someone genuinely suffering the consequences of their own choices. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserved an honest apology. Because I needed to take responsibility for my actions without trying to get anything in return. And because I wanted you to know that your revenge worked. My revenge? Forcing me to face consequences, making it impossible for me to run away from what I'd done or blame other people for my problems. For the first time in my adult life, I had to look honestly at my behavior and accept that I was the villain in the story. The storm outside was reaching its peak, with lightning illuminating the apartment in brief, stark flashes. During one of these moments, I saw Vanessa clearly. Not as the confident manipulator who'd spat in my face, not as the desperate woman who'd begged for forgiveness, but as a damaged person who was finally beginning to understand the cost of her damage. What are you going to do now? I'm moving to Denver. I have a job lined up at a small marketing firm. Nothing glamorous, but honest work for honest pay. I'm going to keep seeing Dr. Martinez remotely, and I'm going to try to build a life based on who I actually am, rather than who I think I should be. That sounds like a good plan. It is. And it's a plan that doesn't involve using other people or taking shortcuts or trying to climb social ladders. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I wanted to thank you for that. Thank me for not letting me get away with it, for making sure I couldn't just move on without consequences. I hated you for it at the time, but it was exactly what I needed. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the storm. I know you'll probably never forgive me, and I'm not asking you to. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I put you through, and I'm genuinely sorry. I joined her at the window, and we stood there in silence for a few minutes, watching the rain. I do forgive you, I said finally. She turned to look at me, surprise evident on her face. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger was poisoning my own happiness. I forgive you so I can move on completely. Thank you. But forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you, and it doesn't mean I want you in my life. This is goodbye, Vanessa, for real this time. I know, and that's okay. You deserve someone who will appreciate what you offer, instead of trying to take advantage of it. She collected her suitcase and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned back one final time. For what it's worth, I think the revenge was perfect. Not cruel, just proportional. You made sure I experienced exactly what I'd put you through, and you did it without compromising your own integrity. Take care of yourself, Vanessa. You too, Jamie. I hope you find someone who deserves you. The door closed behind her, and I was alone again. But this time the solitude felt complete rather than temporary. The Vanessa chapter of my life was finally, definitively, closed. I poured myself one last bourbon and returned to the window. The storm was beginning to pass, and I could see patches of clear sky appearing between the clouds. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was probably driving through the night toward whatever new life she was trying to build. I wished her well, genuinely. Not because I'd forgotten what she'd done, but because her success or failure no longer had any impact on my own happiness. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Katie. "How are you doing? Mom's worried you're spending too many nights alone." I typed back, "I'm great. Better than I've been in years. Tell Mom I'll call her tomorrow." And I meant it. The revenge had been satisfying, but the real victory was simpler than that. I'd learned to value myself enough to demand better treatment, and I'd discovered that I was stronger and more resourceful than I'd ever imagined. The rest was just details. Outside, the storm continued to move east, leaving clear skies and clean air in its wake. I finished my bourbon, turned off the lights, and went to bed, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. The war was over, and I had won.